All right. Hey, welcome back to the Go for CEO channel. This is John the Bomb. Building others means business. And I love my acronyms, but I also love bringing on incredible founders, CEOs, entrepreneurs, COOs, CFOs, entrepreneurs, really just bring you the content that you need to learn how to run a business, how to scale a business, how to operate a business, how to bring true wealth into your life by being able to build your own business and be an entrepreneur as well inside those companies. And I've got a special guest today. His name is Jeremy Vesta. He's a guest and he's the COO of Curally. He's also the founder, one of the co-founders there. With his background as an economist and a wealth of experience in business leadership, Jeremy is passionate about helping companies optimize their investment in their most valuable resource, employees. So stay tuned. Let's rock and roll today. Jeremy, thank you so much and welcome to the show.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me, John.
Awesome, awesome. Well, hey, look, we always try to find out what it is that inspired the ideation of Curely and the company that you founded here, and a little bit of background about that company and who you are, and would love to just take the conversation from there, and then we'll have a great time together.
Yeah, sure. And it's a great story. I mean, I'm glad you asked. We had a family business, fairly large, about 10,000 employees or so, and a manufacturing environment, some union, some non. So pretty dramatic from a healthcare perspective. You're not talking about a lot of super healthy individuals. It's not like we're a bunch of 20 somethings at a tech startup. Like you're talking about significant issues. And we've been very successful relative to the industry and kind of look to give something back. And it's always neat when a business starts from some type of non-profit motive like this and grows into something wonderful. And so what we did was we really focused on what quality care were our employees getting, what kind of access were they getting, what were the linchpins, what were the issues at each stage that were kind of driving the costs. And what we found was, a lot of it's discipline, a lot of it's behavioral. It's not necessarily that the doctors are doing a poor job, but we did find a lot of coordination of care issues, a lot of things like that we needed to get involved in, a lot of large case type issues that were being mismanaged. But when we got a nurse involved, we got a medical director involved, we started engaging those people one on one. And really, kudos to our founder who gave that group the ability to spend a lot more time than a lot of other businesses would do. You know, it's one thing to have like, hey, 15-minute appointments, this or that. We're talking about, hey, you're going to go to that person's house and you're going to meet with them. You're going to spend all day and they're going to miss work, those types of things. We don't necessarily do that today, but those types of things. And what we noticed was we were able to drastically drive down utilization. So not only were we giving something really important back to the people, they were thrilled with it. They were getting much better care. They were satisfied with the results at the hospital if they had an incident. There were much fewer complications. They were healthier. All of those things. That's all great. But on the other side, we saved a ton of money because we just weren't consuming the healthcare. Our number of large cases went down dramatically. The chronic conditions that became hospitalizations became pretty much non-existent amongst the managed population. We kind of thought, look, this is wonderful. Let's bring this to the market because we don't see anything out there like this. We don't see people having dramatic results, talking like, full percentage point reduction in their cost, not even talking about against trend. We're talking about relative to baseline. We're talking about actually bringing utilization out. We saw a market that really focused on unit costs. Hey, we're going to negotiate this type of contract with our health system. We're going to focus on the cost of the knees, the cost of the diagnostics, things like that. That's marginal. They're just going to create more units, right? You actually have to impact those units, and that's what we were able to do, and it was pretty remarkable. Corporate culture became unbelievable. People, employee retention, we saved people's lives, and that starts to spread throughout that company. And they're thrilled that somebody that's employing them is investing back this type of service. And, the great thing is you get a benefit on the other side. And that's what we found.
No, and I wrote down two things: proactive and care.
Yeah.
right? And really, it's interesting, as we went through the pandemic, we were offline talking a little bit about the inspiration of Go for CEO and why I started the podcast. To know and see where the market is and how you actually can grow a company to 10,000 employees, there has to be a basis of proactive and care, right? So, interesting concept. So, help me understand. I mean, obviously, you came from a successful background. You see the Northwestern University, so a smart guy. Um, what were some of the things that when you noticed in your family business that you picked out as ideas, right, that really made sense to then tie it into this business of Curally?
Yeah, I mean, we had had some experience with some of those executive physicals and the type of care you get when you're at a higher level in certain hospital systems, what that looked like. And we also had some unique talent. Our medical director was an ER director for many years, an ER doctor before that. He'd seen everything. Differential diagnosis is just like every single day. What am I seeing here? I got to make a decision. I got to go. And so kind of that diverse background, we came together, we were able to crack the code on some pretty complex things early on. And I think the first thing we noticed is our ability to impact large cases is a lot larger than we would have expected. When we started building the business, we understood large case is going to be a huge part of this. And most people are going after large case from a retrospective perspective, right? They're saying, okay, this is what happened. How do we make that not happen again? Whereas we're trying to get, as the claims are initially being consumed, or even before, we're trying to get ahead of that so we can kind of quarterback the care from that standpoint, similar to if you were in an executive setting at like a Mayo, you know, you wouldn't just immediately go in and have your knee done. There'd be a lot of analysis of who needs to do it, what's the specialty here, what's the exact circumstance. And so we started getting involved in that and doing some things like, okay, hey, you know what? You're on a maintenance chemo drug, but I'd like to get a second opinion from somebody. I'm aware of another treatment. Let's try something different. This happened with one of our clients. All of a sudden, we take them out of network, have a conversation with the HR director to go out of network, costs a little bit more, but a surgical removal, an ablation of the spots, and all of a sudden this individual is in remission, as opposed to being high level of cost. We're talking about $300,000 to $500,000 a year in terms of this chemo maintenance that's just waiting for this person to die when there was a cure available, but nobody was aware of it within the system that we were in. So finding those things, there's just that when you have access to expertise, you don't have to make the experts do the work, but they can point you in the right direction to help us advise our clients to find, hey, here's a unique solution for this. You may not be on top of this, but if you talk to this and go to this person, they're going to be able to do something else. We had another one where somebody was going to go to a regular orthopedic surgeon, pretty good orthopedic surgeon, for a cervical spine issue that actually needed to be microsurgery. I mean, very, very complex, would have ended up with a lot of complications, probably had a 50-50 chance of being paralyzed by the orthopod. Got him into this expert. We called our contact, who's chief of surgery at Emory, found out who would do it in the southeastern Wisconsin area, went to Madison, found a great guy. And this person basically was even off pain meds within 2 weeks. Unbelievable results, right? But you don't see those in the medical system, right? The chronic conditions really, really matter. We know that. Your diabetes, keeping those under control, reversing them, getting those people to do their diet, exercise, all those things they don't want to do. So the behavioral management side is important, but you find that the care that's being provided, even when you think it's pretty good, there's usually other options. It's very rare that we find a large case that we can have no impact on, for example. And you would think that would be more the case. You'd think we'd look at the claims data and be like, well, probably not going to impact that. That's a stage 4 cancer. What are we going to do? But there's always little wrinkles. And I think that's what is so exciting about what we bring as non-medical people into the medical world, is that creativity. We're looking at things in a different way than your hospital system is, than your insurance company is, than some care provider would be.
Interesting. It makes me think a lot about capitalism and trying to figure out different ways, right? What solutions are you bringing to a problem, right? And it sounds like Curally and your team really have thought out some well thought out things. I wrote down also advocate. For me to be an employee at a company and to have a resource where I can literally sit down more than that 10-minute feeling like you're going through like a slaughterhouse, right? Sometimes,
Yeah,
I mean,
pretty much.
I've
Yeah.
we've experienced it with our daughter. We went to Lurie's Children's, which is one of the
Hmm.
best in the nation,
Hmm.
for something that she had, and then my wife with some kidney stuff that we had two opinions. But even just that, I mean, unless you have the resources to do that, sometimes you just take that first opinion and you run with it, right? And then you hope that that person that was giving you that guidance was actually took the time, right, to even just understand where you're at. So it's really interesting. It's a real interesting business model. I see you want to say something there.
Yeah, I was going to say, well, and think of the type of people that are really consuming the majority of your healthcare spend within a plan. They're not the disciplined. They're the ones with collateral mental health issues. They're the ones that are most likely to just listen to their doctor or not listen to their doctor completely
Mm,
and lead to bigger problems. But when they have somebody they trust, when you've built that authentic relationship with them, now all of a sudden you're helping them through the system, both on behalf of them and the company. Whereas the company, I mean, who are you going to talk with in your company, your HR team? They don't really know anything about the healthcare system, but they're supposed to be the experts for the company, right?
yeah, yeah. So let's get into, you bring up this idea. You're in a in a data collecting mindset, right? While you had your other company with the family owned business, and you think of this idea, you put this team together. What was that journey like, and how is the structure of monetization look like for
Sure,
you or Curely?
sure. Long and hard. We had very patient capital. That's one thing that really helped. It took us 6 to 8 years to really get our heads around specifically what we wanted to do to put the idea into force before we really got together and started going forward. Had to invest a lot of money into what are we going to do in terms of IT type infrastructure. Need an app, need some environment where the employee can or the member can engage, and you got to have a value proposition. Initially, because of our results in the Northeast Wisconsin area and throughout the country with our initial company, we thought, percentage of savings sounds great. But when you get into that, you start to think about, okay, now you got to hire like a Milliman to do some analysis or an outside statistics company. And then there's a lot of gray area, right? Now you're talking about this is expected spend versus what's expected spend? Would it have been this year and 2 years and 5 years? It becomes really hard to work through that. And you don't have a lot of control yet over that company when you first start out. You're just building that relationship too. So what we came up with is, looking at kind of a PMPM or a flat fee based on membership, based on risk. We look at their claims, we look at that. Here's what we need to make this attractive to us. And here's what we think based on your claims run. Here's what we think we're going to save you. And it's worked out well. We've had, anywhere from a 3.5 to a 5 ROI, depending on the quarter. Really good results. A lot of it coming from, some cost savings. We had that was headed towards renal failure and going to end up on dialysis, super expensive. Totally reverse that. Well, we'll take credit for that. But we basically then talk, these are the people that we keep under management. These were their costs last year. These are their costs this year. And here's the difference, so that it's very transparent, very open. And the companies over time, they realize, we're not taking credit for a lot of what they're actually going to experience. We had a client this year that was able to keep their premiums unchanged, compared to last year, which I'm not aware of anybody that's been able to do that in
Yeah,
my world.
yeah,
Because basically we had stripped out a lot of that utilization they were previously experiencing. Um, And so then it looks really good. You have a great relationship. You grow on that. You can upsell other business arms, things like biometrics. We find we're getting creative in some of those areas where we're finding, hey, everybody hires a biometric. They're usually very expensive. They're usually a venipuncture type thing where you're taking a blood draw. You don't need any of that data to really manage their health. You need a few basic things, a height, a weight, an age, a blood sugar, which you can get from a simple glucometer, a total cholesterol number if you want, and a blood pressure. You can do all that on the spot, very inexpensively with a team of nurses, and not have to bring in a phlebotomist, not have to send things off to a lab. And frankly, that's all we're going to use. So when we partner with the company, that looks better. So you upsell them on those services, you get a little bit more on that. We've looked into partnering with couple different apps that we can bring in and white brand that will be kind of multiplicative, where they have an impact on their own, but when you combine it with the relationships we build, now it's enormous. That's kind of how we look to grow our business. Is, you got a hub and spoke. You develop the relationship with that business. You kind of become almost indispensable, because if they let you go, all of those people under management are going to go right back to consuming.
Mhm.
Yeah, it's kind of the beauty of what we do. We never let anybody leave management, because at some point they're going to get undisciplined again, right? So you got to be there for them. Well, if you lose Curally, now you've lost that relationship that has really worked to keep them healthy. So what are they likely going to do? Over time, they're going to have an event. They're going to have a depressed weekend. They're going to have something where they're going to start that cycle again. And within a very short period of time, it's actually remarkable. I mean, some people, it can be even 6 months. They're right back in the hospital. They're having issues, and it's all over, right? So then you're going to experience quite a bit of increase. So we just scale it that way, build it out. You add hubs and spokes all over, and then you can go to other regions and grow the business.
It's interesting. You're bringing up a lot of accountability, right, with the employees, with the executive teams that want to be able to show a proactive care
Yeah.
approach with their employees. What are some of the things that have been challenges for our Go for CEO community? We're always talking about scalability, operations, technology that you've been able to implement.
hmm
Because how old is Curely up to now?
We got our first client in 2016.
Okay, so
Yeah.
what, 8 years.
Yeah.
So most companies, it's those first 2 to 5 years, right? It's hard to kind of
Right.
get through, break through. It sounded like you had
Yeah.
some financial backing that allowed you some breathing room, some
Yes. Yep.
some some burn rate, right? So
Yes, exactly.
to be able to do things. So tell us about the scalability side, because it does seem to be an intense business where, if you
It
get three
is. Yeah.
or five clients that have, I don't know, 500 to
hmm
10,000 employees like your company had, what does that look like in this workplace, in this marketplace that we're having challenges with labor for you guys, for
Yeah.
Curely?
I mean, the beauty of it is you don't have to manage that many people.
Okay.
So that's really where it's at. We're not going to manage the whole population. That'd be silly, right? When we go in there, we'll offer something, for everybody within their population, because everybody wants to have some kind of touch for everybody, so it feels like a benefit for everybody. But the reality is, it needs to be a benefit for about 15% of the people, and even within that, you're not going to get them all at once.
Hmm.
So, you can achieve, $1 million plus savings to a plan with 50 people under management, and grow it from there. You go after those very high costs, you get a lot of the chronic conditions under management early on, and you start to analyze, where do I need to go? So you don't have to employ a ton of resources. We're not bringing in a team of 15 to 20 nurses into a company and trying to manage everybody. We're saying, no, we're going to pick these select people that are very risky. We're going to reach out to them. We're going to cold call them, show up at work, get to know them, give presentations, do a lot of internal PR, so that they'll join us. So we're self-selecting our participants, as opposed to waiting for them to come to us. And then we from there, then we start the process. We manage them. We make them healthier. So scalability wise, you don't need, it's a pretty lean organization. You don't need a lot of resources for every client you bring on. You're talking about, one medical director can probably take on 5 to 6 companies. Depending on the size of the company, you might need anywhere from 1 to 4 nurses, but usually 1 or 2 is plenty, especially early on. And you wouldn't want to add necessarily more resources until you're able to take on more of the risk and manage more of the risk. So it starts out as a very lean proposition. And again, if you're talking about saving them, 1.5, 1.7 million in a year, especially early on when there's a lot of risk there, and then maintaining that long term, you can see how the value proposition is pretty simple because your costs aren't that high. You're amortizing that medical director over several companies. And the types of nurses that we're bringing in are, we're not trying to bring in necessarily super high level PAs, right? We're trying to bring in people that can actually connect with the population we're managing. A lot of home health nurses, things like that, where they have a unique experience where they have the ability to form relationships with people. That's what we need them to do, not necessarily handle all the clinical, because the medical director is going to drive a lot of that, but we need them to be able to really make and form relationships with those people.
So, and this is more of a selfish question because I have some
Yeah,
assisted living and primary care clients in my side of the
yeah.
world outside of the Go for CO. When you're saying that, so is it primary care then that you technically take over, or?
Nope, we don't even take over. So we provide no care. So we totally avoid any of the liability insurance or any of those issues.
Oh,
What
okay.
we do is we're strictly a conduit and an advocate and an advisor. So it's almost like being a health coach, right?
Yeah,
But it's more
exactly.
than that because you're actually showing up at doctor's visits, and doing things like that. And we have a great relationship with the provider community because we basically walk into them and say, okay, hey, uh, this is your plan for individual A, right? And mostly that's a risk management plan. We know because you get 5, 10 minutes with them and you're saying, I'm not going to be able to guarantee this person does anything to improve their health in the next year or 6 months. So I'm just going to have to throw meds at it. I'm going to have to basically do whatever I need to do to control the risk. And we say, what would you like that care plan to be? What's your ideal? If you could actually follow this person through and make sure that they were doing what you wanted them to do, what would it look like? And they get excited because now we're like the ultimate extender, right? It's like we're with them several times during the week, spending, 15 minutes here, an hour and a half there, having these conversations, checking in on them when they're really down and finding out, okay, let's do better tomorrow. There's no big deal. Staying in front of it, keeping the plate spinning, as it were. Um, and now this is achievable. Whereas before, they were basically, it's a fait accompli. This
Mhm.
person's health is going to be what it's going to be. It's going to get worse every year. At some point, this person's going to be ending up in a hospitalization situation, maybe a mortality issue. We'll find out, but it's not going to get any better. Or, for instance, like look at your orthopedics, right? How many knees are done on on an individual with a BMI that's 37 plus, right? And they just the pain's so bad. I'm a cutter. I like to cut. It's going to make it better. No harm, no foul. There, it is going to help the individual. Maybe they're thinking if I can give them the knee and they can get through the rehab, they can do some more exercise. But I'm not planning. I don't believe they're actually going to lose the weight. And sometimes now they're asking for them to lose the weight, but we get in front of it before they even go to talk to the orthopod to say, hey, you think you could lose 10 pounds? You think you could
Mhm.
lose 5 pounds? Okay. Then they do that. You think you could lose another five? Okay. Then you have the conversation. Well, if I get you under X, you may not have the knee pain anymore. How about we just keep doing this and let's see where it goes
Mhm.
and see if you even need the procedure for real or if it's just related to your BMI to begin with. And we've had instances where people totally avoid surgeries because hey, they got their life under control and they started doing things, and the exercise was promoting the health of their joints. The lack of weight was helping promote the health of their joints, and there you go, you're not consuming. So it's overarching. It's it We don't have to provide the care. The care is already in place. We're just trying to get people to follow the care that's in place or find the care that they should have.
They should have had, it should have been recommended.
Yeah,
No, interesting.
right.
Wow. It's a, there's a lot of philosophical questions I could probably ask, because I feel like there's such a demand for this. It's kind of like just having, you mentioned coaching, right?
Yeah,
Met much of the marketplace over the last 5-10 years, and there's a lot of flood of these people that are coaches, but your
yeah,
business model really creates this really dynamic way of using
yeah.
the mindset of coaching that person, and then having the company basically sponsor it as an employee benefit, right? So it's
Well, and
pretty
who joins coaching? It's the disciplined people that join coaching. I could see you
yeah,
joining a coach to fix some, maybe you have some shoulder pain. Okay, I'm going to be proactive and do my own physical therapy so that I don't end up with a shoulder surgery. I those people already do that. We're going after the lowest common denominator in every population. These are the people that don't have good support systems. They have, undiagnosed or even diagnosed and not controlled depression. Um, they have very poor eating habits, largely in relation to their depression. Their life situations aren't exactly fantastic. Like they're not, you could bring in a coaching type product into a company, but none of these individuals are going to sign up for it
no.
because they don't want to be seen. They don't want to be held accountable. They're scared, but they're also, fairly undisciplined in this regard, and they're not going to want to respond. We go out and we form the relationships. And I think that's the major difference between what we do and what a lot of other companies do is that we're proactive even with those people, and we get the lowest common denominator to trust and believe in us and to start believing in themselves. And I think that's what's so powerful, not just from the health perspective, not just from any of that, but we're connecting with people the company hasn't been able to connect with. Right?
No,
They've probably had some poor reviews. They've probably had, performance management issues for a while as well, and we're getting them to do something that even HR hasn't been able to get them to do.
Yeah, it's interesting. And I could envision when you're, per se pitching or selling your service now with this track record of 8 years, really showcasing these
Yeah,
stories, right? And stories sell. For me, as a CEO of a company or, CFO, CEO, any C-suite, and we look at a service like this, we would be
yeah,
like, wow, this really makes a lot of sense, right? So, interesting stuff. A really, really, really neat business model. There's a question that I wanted to ask that came up. It says beyond the benefit plan when standard coverage isn't enough. That's kind of what
mm,
you just described, right? Is
yeah,
is you went to an ortho and then you combine that strategy to be able to talk to the ortho and be able to say, hey, what would you ideally do? And then you
mhm,
almost convince or persuade that client per se employee to go to the next level. So that's awesome stuff. So tell me, we typically end the interviews with CEO. So it's customer experience, engagement, used to be called employee engagement, but just different areas, operational excellence. And you've talked about, you had this vision with the co-founder to be able to see how you can use what you guys did in your own business out into the marketplace. So now you created that. There's the idea. Boom. Now,
yeah.
the network that you had, because you were a big company, you had a lot of resources and things like that. When you think about customer experience at a high level for Curally, what do you think is the most impactful thing, or at least a value proposition, as you've talked about, from customer experience?
Sure. I think it's the fact that we go above and beyond. You're going to find in any given population that we're going to save some lives, like legitimately save some lives, as I've talked about. I told you before the show we prevented a suicide just a
Uh,
couple weeks ago. It's something that's totally outside of the medical sphere, but it's what happens. And I think the thing to note from a customer experience perspective is we're totally embedded in your population. We're totally invested in what we're going to do for your company. So there's really no limits. You want us to come in and give a presentation that talks about diabetes. Well, we're going to do it in a way that's interesting and doesn't bore the heck out of your people because we know we got to keep their attention. We're going to find an angle that's hot, right? We're going to talk about Ozempic or something, but we're also there to support your goals. Like, what are you trying to achieve throughout your population, right? It's not a product where, hey, you've bought this and these are the services we're going to render. No, you've bought our service and we're committed to you in whatever way we can do within the scope of what we do to help bring people to better health. So it's wide ranging. We don't just stop at, hey, this is a 9 to 5 and then we're done. We're always available. We're always thinking. We're always trying to be creative with the companies that we get involved in. And if we see something, like we see a spike in large cases that seems a little bit odd, we're going to talk to you about it and let's get creative from the benefit side. We'll expand out. We've got experience with the full range of what you would do as a business.
That's so interesting. Interesting. Yeah. I mean, I kind of thought came through my mind as far as being a charitable organization, right? I
Yeah.
feel a lot of the things that you're sharing come from a charitable organization mindset, yet you're in a
Yeah.
for-profit business and trying to marry those two activities into the marketplace, right? Into these
Mhm.
clients. So really cool stuff. So E is for engagement, and it
Yep.
could be your vendor network. It could be obviously your clientele. It could be the
Yep.
employees that you've been able to surround yourself and become a team. What do you think from your perspective, Jeremy, is really
Yeah.
a high level of engagement?
What's so cool about what we do is from an engagement perspective, we know the employees that we work with better than anybody in the company knows them. We get embedded so far that we actually have almost more influence than, say the HR team or their managers or anything. So there's such a high level of engagement and there's such a high level of participant satisfaction. Our satisfaction scores, we do some surveys and things. They're regularly right at the top of the scale, just within a margin of error. Rarely get any negative comments at all. People are thrilled with this product. So it's something that makes the company look really good because you invested in this and everybody's very happy that it's there. It's lowering your costs, but we're also really getting to know your people, and we can sometimes make you aware of some things, even before you're aware of them. We're aware of some things happening, or this person's going to be going on leave, or this is happening because I talked to them, and hey, you might want to help them through this, or by the way, you're turning 65 next year. Let's talk about Medicare. That plan might be cheaper for you than the company plan. Let's get proactive with that because that helps everybody. Those types of things. It's a very high level of engagement, and it's total engagement. We get involved in the whole person, which is what's so cool.
It's super dynamic. It's very, very interesting. I'm very, very curious, and I hope the Go for CEO community,
Yeah.
you could take this from your small business to a medium-sized business to a large business, and just the thought and the mindset that Jeremy and his team have been able to put together and infiltrate the marketplace with this type of mindset is really kind of a world changer, right? It's making a big difference into the world of the marketplace and business world itself. So last thing is operational excellence. A lot of times we grow a business and we need to adapt to the next system.
Mhm.
A lot of small businesses start with EOS, right? And if they run with that the right way, they've learned the right way to operate their business. I know we didn't hit too much of this piece of the puzzle, but Curally and what you've been able to do with your executive team and leadership, what do you
Yeah.
think of some operational excellence components that you put together?
You have to think about the growth plan from the start and what it's going to look like. It's not going to be correct. You're going to learn a lot of things along the way that aren't quite what you thought they were. You're going to make some pivots, some changes, but if you don't have a framework, you're just going to go into it. And I would say both from a management of your personnel standpoint and from a data management standpoint, those two things, if you're not thinking about the future from those two perspectives, you're either going to have data that's absolutely unusable and you're going to be hiring a lot of summer interns to clean it up long term. You got to think about how is this all going to work together? What could I possibly be using this for in the future? And you'll be surprised, things you don't think are valuable in 5 to 6 years, that's now a KPI and something you're watching very closely. But also from the personnel standpoint, you've got to establish, and it's easy when it's a small family run or a smaller business with fewer employees. You know everybody. So the management is much more ad hoc Your interactions can be more conversational. Systems don't need to be in place. But if you've got now 40 employees or 500 employees, now systems become important. So you need to set the precedent of how those systems are going to be and how that management process is going to look before you get there. Because if you get there and you've got 40, 50 employees and now you're going to try to change things, that's going to be a lot of work. And it's going to be you as the business owner or manager that's going to be doing all of that work. So save yourself some time, think ahead. You're still going to make some mistakes, but at least then it'll be closer to what it needs to be when you get there.
Well, they say systems, save yourself time, energy, and money, right? So
Yeah. Yeah.
I love it. I love it. So, Jeremy, thank you so much for being a part of the Go for CEO channel. I think it's a lot of value that you brought today. And, I hope that people engage with this. If you haven't, smash the like button, smash the like button on YouTube, or if you're on Spotify right now or on Amazon Music or iHeartRadio. Would love to have your comments and share back with Jeremy what you thought about this interview. Jeremy, also, to end the interview, is there ways that, or what ways would you recommend for someone that maybe come across this video and interview that wants to engage with Curally, that wants to be able to get a hold of you? So social medias and any way that you feel would be best.
Yeah, you can always reach out on LinkedIn and things like that. If you go to our website, curally.com, there's an engagement portion where you can reach out, provide your contact info. That stuff comes pretty much right to our team, and we'll get back with you, and we'd love to chat.
Awesome, awesome. Well, hey, Go for CEO community, take a listen. Repeat this type of interview a few times when you're listening in your habits and you're driving around. And I think what Curally has done is really a blue ocean, right? They're creating some really neat things into the marketplace, and super excited that we were able to have you on, Jeremy. So thank you so much for being a part of the Go for CEO community.
Honored to be here. Thanks so much for having me.